I can't use the car in the city. I can't. I can't. It's cycling is life.
Hello and welcome to Season 3, Episode 5 of the Squeaky Wheel podcast. We speak with leading influencers about policy, industry and more across cycling, walking and all other forms of human-scaled mobility. My name is Phil Latz and I've been squeaking about various causes for over 40 years.
And I'm Sarah Stace, Director of Cities at Vivendi Cities, joining today from Gadigal Land in Sydney. Now, before we introduce you to this month's guest, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe via your podcast platform of choice and leave us a review, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts. And thank you so much for your support.
From the 8th to the 11th of September, the transport profession will come together in Meanjin, Brisbane for the 2026 National Transport Conference, centred on the theme Shaping the Future, Moving the Now. Across 4 energising days, delegates will reimagine how we plan, move and connect as we work towards thriving, inclusive and sustainable communities. The program features thought-provoking presentations from featured speakers, practical hands-on workshops and unmissable opportunities to connect with peers from across the sector. Delegates will hear from close to 100 speakers, including influential leaders such as Hill Penaloza from 880 Cities, Teresa Wells from GHD New Zealand, Sally Stannard, Director General of the Queensland Department of Transport and Main Roads, and Professor Amelia Thorpe from the University of New South Wales. From policy and planning to delivery and operations, and across every career stage, the National Transport Conference is where the transport profession connects, challenges ideas and shapes the future. Registrations are now open and close on the 30th of August 2026. Secure your place and be part of the conversation in Brisbane. Register now at transportprofessionals.com.au. This month our guest is Anna Carboni, who lives in Brasilia, which is a purpose-built modern city in Brazil, in fact the capital of Brazil, which in turn is the largest nation in South America and one of the largest nations in the world, as a matter of fact, by area. So many podcasts, including ours, are guilty of mainly speaking to guests from Europe or North America. Meanwhile, South America is the 4th largest continent on Earth and home to over 440 million people, but we rarely hear about anything cycling related from there. Anna originally qualified and worked as a clinical psychologist, then had a career in human resources before moving into advocacy. She now works as a project manager with the Brazilian Cyclist Union and has extensive first-hand experience in trying to move the needle in this complex nation of over 213 million people, who mostly speak Portuguese as their first language. That's also the first of Anna's 4 languages, but fortunately for us, English is also part of her repertoire.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for joining us on the Squeaky Wheel podcast. Most of our listeners would never have visited your home city of Brasilia. Why did you move there, and what is everyday life like in Brasilia?
Thank you for having me. It's very nice to be able to talk to you a little bit about, I think, Brasilia and Brazil in general. I moved to Brasilia in 2021 to advocate for speed reduction in Brazil. I had a project I was already engaged in a project that had this objective of changing the Brazilian legislation to have lower speeds in cities. In Brazil, in avenues, you can have up to 60 kilometers per hour. So we want to reduce that to 50 And the speeds here, they are set up by the type of the road, not by the use of the road. So this is another thing that we want to change in the legislation. It has been very difficult, this change. We have a bill going through Congress now, and it might be not be included in the report, the representative that's reporting. So we are fighting all we can to keep it there. But my reason for coming to Brasilia is this. I have a relationship with Brasilia since I was very little. My grandfather moved here when Brasilia was created because it was a planned city. It was a planned city in the 50s, so it was a planned city for cars. It is fast lanes, and till the 1990s, there were no pedestrian crossings. It was just yeah, there was no crossings. Like it was insane. So there was a big campaign by activists to have the road crossings implemented and traffic lights as well. There weren't traffic lights. It was a city that was built for speed. Here, the lanes are wider than the majority of the country by law, so cars can go faster.
It sounds like an automotive dystopia, something out of Mad Max or something. Unbelievable.
Yes, it is unbelievable. The idea of the architects that thought Brasilia was that people would walk within their small residential areas, but if they want to go anywhere, they would have to get a car. It was built for that. So cycling here is really, really a challenge. We had now just survey released that 52% of people in Brasilia or in the surrounding areas, the metropolitan region, use cars to move about because public transportation is not good. Cycling and walking is really a challenge. Every time I stay here in Brasilia, that my family doesn't own a car here. It's not just me that don't have a car. No one in my family has a car. And people are like, how do you do it? How can you do it? And I said, it is difficult. It is not an easy choice. Putting my bicycle on the road every day, it is a challenge because the speeds here are high. Even though there are more traffic crossings and the speeds limits are lower than when the city was created, it's still difficult. Enforcement is not great. So, but I'm not alone. There are a lot of people here that are advocating to improve the situation. We have what we called, in Portuguese, is Rede Urbanidade, which is a network of people and organizations that come together to advocate for improvements in the city. So regarding pedestrians, cyclists, and so we had some successes. We are in the process of having a bicycle parking built in the bus terminal here in the center of Brasilia. So that was a very important win for this group, which has the support of the Public Defense Office in Brasilia. We have a lot of support from the Public Prosecutor's Office.
Whereabouts within the city, what sort of area are you living in where you're sitting right now? And if you were to get up from your chair right now and go out the door to your street, what scene would you typically see? What would you be expecting to see?
I live in the residential area of what we call Plano Piloto, which is the center of everything, very close to the National Congress. This was a choice we made to live here because it was close to where I would work on a daily basis. If I go out of the door, what I see is parking for cars. Parking in Brasilia, there's no paid parking. It's all free. So people park everywhere. There are cars everywhere. And that's what I see that's why I laugh, because when I go out of the door, what I see is a sea of cars.
That is unbelievable. I did research before this session. I think the greater urban area of Brasilia is something like 3.5 million people. It's not a small city we're talking. And to have no paid parking, or no on-street paved parking. I guess there's paid parking garages.
Yeah, they have done a privatized one small area of like in near the bus terminal where I would say there is a center. In Brasilia, we don't have a city center. Each region residential area has their own like shops, and it's a bit decentralized. But there is this bus terminal that I would say would be the central point. And they have privatized some of the parkings there. And there was a big reaction from people saying, that's absurd. How can you privatize public space? And I'm like, you're privatizing public space if you have your car for the 8-hour day there. So this is your private vehicle occupying a space. That's privatizing. But people, it's difficult here to. I understand that the public transportation is not good, so it is a challenge to use public transport. And Brasilia is really, you said 3 million people, and it would be a metropolitan region, like it would be a bigger region. And the smaller, in the more centralized space is about 400,000. It's not a lot of people. And so the majority of these 3 million people come to work here because the work is in the center. So how can they move about if the public transportation it's not good? There are people that have to do like 60 kilometers to come to work, like every day, back and forth. So if you don't have a good public transportation, you don't have trains or metro, you have just buses that are normally very full and not reliable. It's difficult how to change the culture of using a car. Everybody wants to have a car, and the lady that does the cleaning here in my house, she owns a car because there's no other way for her to come to my house or any other houses that she works at.
How many people there would ride bicycles, and how many kilometres of good quality bicycle paths would there be in the city?
The number of cyclists is difficult to make an assessment because there's no official number. The governments in Brazil, they don't do this. They don't just do the counting or the survey. We think it's around 3% of the people that use bicycles, but this is a number that I wouldn't be able to say, oh, it's really this, because there's no official account for this. Brasilia has, I think, the second largest number of kilometers of cycle lanes in Brazil. Brazilian capitals is around 700 kilometers. But they're not connected, they're not well maintained. Near me, I have a few cycle lanes that are reasonable, and I live really in the affluent area that as it could be. It should be wonderful, and it isn't. If I want to go north to south, I can, like in a stretch. But if I want to go east to west, there was no cycle lane. So it's usually where I want to go, there is no cycle lanes. I ride on the street. A lot of very close calls I encounter. Part of my normal life, like to have that.
That's terrible. Sarah?
Anna, you're one of the key organisers of the World Bicycle Forum. For our listeners who haven't heard of it, can you tell us more about what the World Bicycle Forum is and your role in it?
Yeah, the World Bicycle Forum started in 2012. It started in Brazil. It was a reaction from a motorist he hit about, I think, 17 cyclists in the critical mass in Porto Alegre. He accelerated because he was irritated he thought he was being delayed by the critical mass and that it shouldn't be happening. So he had his son in the car. He was arrested a few years ago. He's serving 12 years for what he did, for endangering.
Were any of the cyclists killed or badly injured?
No, there were a few that was injured. I wouldn't say badly injured, but yeah, they were hurt.
That was a miracle that it wasn't worse.
Yeah, yes, it was. It was. He really accelerated on top of the cyclists. There are images from the because there were people that were filming the movement, etc. So he ran from, he was arrested much later than he should.
It was a hit and run. He drove off afterwards.
Yeah, he drove off.
Goodness.
He was arrested and there was a long, lengthy legal proceeding. But he was finally arrested again, and for the amount of time that I think it was 2020 or something like that, he was really finally arrested. But the movement for the World Bicycle Forum has started from that occurrence in 2011, and then it happened in Brazil in 2 years in a row, and then left Brazil, and we say that took off from us. Like it was. And currently I'm a member of the World Bicycle Forum's memory secretariat, as we call it, is keep the history alive and to people to understand what happened and then why it started. This year the forum is going to happen in El Salvador between, I think it's the 15th to the 17th of September, if I'm not mistaken. There is a page on Instagram and I can send the links and everything.
Yes, we'll put it in the show notes. That will be fine.
It is free for everybody. That's one of the main. In 2021, we organized a regiment like to guide organizers because we had nothing. And now we have rules that how things should happen. We've been to like Chile, Colombia, Mexico, Canada, in Nepal. We had one edition in Nepal. It was a shame because it was in 2020 and it was all online because of COVID. But yeah, the idea is for us to have an event outside South America and then coming back to South America and then out again. The idea is to have that. But yeah, it's usually very fun. People present their work and we have cycling events and it is really, really nice. We had it here in Brasilia. It was in Brasilia in 2024. I was one of the organizers here. We did together with our national forum. It was our national forum and the World Bicycle Forum. It was an amazing experience. It was really great.
How many people would you have got that year to attend, do you think?
It was around 400 people.
Okay, so it's a big event.
Yeah.
And Anna, what are some of the themes that you see that tend to come up? And are there new themes that you think are changing or emerging over time?
One thing that is consistent within South America is road safety. A lot of the cycling community, they are getting together with the pedestrian organizations that are emerging to have. I think most of us understood that alone we won't be able to do it, that we need to get together with users of public transportation, with pedestrians, and to bring this together. Road safety is the one key thing that will bring everybody together. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time in Brazil, but as from 2020, when we had COVID, and then we had less cars on the roads and more violence, people were speeding more, and we started receiving like news clips from everywhere in Brazil that cyclists are being killed or injured or badly injured by motorists. And we were like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? We said we need to do something about how speed is talked about, how we manage speed in the cities. And we had a very good case in Brazil, in Fortaleza, that the mayor really embraced the idea of reducing speeds, and it had a really big impact on crashes and collisions, hit and runs and things like that. So we have already a good, like a best practice scenario here in Brazil, because what we heard in the beginning was like, oh, this would never work in Brazil. you used to hear this a lot. Between 2018 and 2023, the mayor in Fortaleza, he reduced speeds like, I think, 190 kilometers of avenues from 60 to 50. And it wasn't a huge change. It was in reality small. And it had a big impact that serious collisions had 68% reduction in these roads where they had the speed reduction. So we understood that this was a big thing. And this is a theme that we see in Latin America in general, like not just in Brazil, but or South America. I think Latin America in general, it's talking about this.
I was just thinking while you were talking, gee, if you've got those high speeds, hardly any crossings, a real car culture, I wonder what the road toll is. And I've just been Googling while you've been talking. 34,000 people a year and 1,500 cyclists a year killed, according to this, 1,400 to 1,500. Staggering.
Yeah, it is staggering. It is really bad. But yeah, we're trying to make our voices heard in terms of politicians. They think that people don't want the reduction of speed because it's not very palatable or politically wise move, because they will thinking is election. We have elections this year. We have in reality we have two bills going through Congress at the moment. One of them is a bit under the radar and is going through, and the other one might fall behind because people or politicians are afraid of this, to reduce speed, to improve enforcement, and we still hear that we have culture of having the penalties are for having just the money for the penalties, that they don't serve to curb behavior. It's just money. That's an insanity. What we hear often here in the Congress, and that's the perception of politicians. It's not the perception of the people. It's not the reality. Well, when we interview people and we have researches that, like surveys and research that say this, that people are pro road safety, but the politicians still go for it.
Anna, it sounds like my guess is that you don't necessarily have a lot of women riding bikes. And do you also see that occurring in the politics as well?
Yeah, unfortunately we have a minority of women cycling, and that because the roads are so dangerous, that's one of the reasons that people don't cycle much. And it's not just road safety. Then you include the more general safety in terms of policing and etc. Here in Brasilia, for example, you don't have good street lights for people, so it's all focused on the road. So on cycle lanes, it's very dark. The other day I was coming back home from an event in the legislative house here for the federal district where Brasilia is part of, and I had to come down the pedestrian path because the cycle lane was so dark, and I was afraid there are lots of trees and where people could hide. I don't know. It could be dangerous, and I had to go like closer to the road. So in the pedestrian path, it was better, and then I felt a little bit safer. But that's an issue, like for women to cycle more. And in Congress, it's more or less the same. We have an overall 18% of women in Congress at the moment. And that's it. There are two issues. Women, some of them don't want to get involved in politics because it is difficult, exactly because of that, because it's a male-dominated situation. And the others is that they don't have as much support. There is a quota for the parties to have X number of women to be candidates, but they don't receive the same support as men. So in terms of money, in terms of real political support, this is slowly changing, but it's a very slow movement. Like, I only vote for women, and if possible, women of color, because then to change this, but it is a struggle, and we have in Brazil, majority of the population is women. It's almost 50-50, but we are slight majority, and it should be different in Congress. We should reflect that, and we don't.
I want to move to your current organisation that you work for. Talk about that in a moment, but you've had an extremely interesting and varied career before that. Education and career as a clinical psychologist, senior human resources manager, volunteering and working in the charity sector. But one role that took my eye was you had 11 years living in London working at the Brazilian embassy. That was a while ago, but did your lived experience there open your eyes to active transportation and public transportation and so forth?
Absolutely. I lived in the UK for 14 years. I worked in the embassy for 11. I was in London when they launched Time Boris Bikes, the shared bicycle scheme. It was something that made me look at things a little bit different, knowing other cultures and understanding that it was possible to change. When I left London, it was 2012. Cycling culture wasn't as strong as it is today. There were a few people at the embassy that cycled to work. And I always thought at the time, my kids were young and we didn't have the possibility of cycling. It was like I used public transportation to move more than a bicycle. But it was different. The respect that the cyclists had, like, I know that it's not perfect in London. It was impressive, like how people respect each other, how there were rules that there are not a lot of rules in the UK in terms of road policies. The ones that they had were really enforced, and this made a difference. So yeah, it does send me in a different path, I would say. Working with cycling, it was something that came to me. I didn't go for it. It was something that happened to me. I always joke this. I used the bicycle to move in the city since I was 13. When I got my first bicycle, I was 13. And for me, it was a tool for freedom, because I used to do sailing, and to go for the sailing classes, I had to get 2 buses, and it was a 15-minute bicycle ride. And this for me was like changed everything when I got that first bicycle. So when I left Brazil, I didn't cycle as much in the UK than when I was in. I had 2 kids, and it was a crazy moment at the time. But yeah.
Moved back to Brazil, and for the past 8 years, you've filled various roles at the UCB. Now, I am not going to even attempt to pronounce that name in Portuguese. So could you please do that and just give us a brief, broad overview of what the UCB is and does?
A União de Ciclistas do Brasil is a Brazilian cyclist union, and we started to represent other associations nationally. It was an organization that was created with that aim, and we still do that. We have, if you want to be a member of UCB, if it's just you don't pay anything, you just can fill a form and be part of it. We work with volunteers, but we also have worked with projects. So I'm engaged in one of the projects, which is called Vias Seguras, which is safe streets, with this idea of road safety. But we have other projects. We developed a national cycling strategy with the federal government and other associations and groups and the productive sector as well, the importers and people that build bikes. So this is another project, the strategy. The strategy now will be adopted by the federal government. They are creating a national mobility plan, and this cycling plan is going to be within this. We have a city that's going to go for a pilot of transforming this strategy in action plan. We also have a cycle map that was built together with ITDP Brazil, and it's something that is a collaborative tool that you can add the cycle lane, cycle paths on your city, and the idea is to have like a really big map of all the infrastructure that we have, because it's a peer user added tool. Then it's not everything is there, but a lot of our cycle lanes are there. We have also the bicycle observatory, that the idea is to have everything that you have related to cycling there, related to research and to all the content that you think that about bicycles you have in the observatory. So UCB has grown, and we are, I think, that started as an activist-led initiative, and now we are moving towards an advocacy more together with government and having that. We don't receive any money from government. We receive money from private donations from companies and from other NGOs and institutions, international and national. So that's how we fund our work. But yeah, I think there is space for activism, but also for advocacy. I think there are two things that need to work together, I would say. Like, even if the activists are like, oh, we need to go to the street and to shout, yes, but we also need to sit down and be able to talk and be able to build bills and policies, and it's what we've been doing the past 19 years.
And Anna, what would you say your biggest successes have been in that time? What are the things that you're most proud of?
I live in Brasilia now, but I'm originally from Niterói, a city of 500 inhabitants or the population of 500,000 in the metropolitan region of Rio de Janeiro. I was very active in Niterói as soon as I came back from the UK. We were able to. Now we have department within the local government that takes care of cycling. We have the highest number of cyclists in the cycle lane in Brazil. It's over 7,000 trips a day, which is a lot. And cycling has really become something there that I don't think the city will be able to go back to the way it was. The number of cyclists it's exploding every time it's bigger, and we're able to we have now a bicycle parking that had 400 spaces till recently, and now has nearly 1,000 spaces, and it's full every day. And people are demanding more infrastructure. It's a key that can't be reversed. It's going forward. And we have shared bike scheme that is free for everybody. No one pays any fees to use the bicycle share scheme. It is, to me, it's like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm very proud of.
So is that the best cycling city in Brazil?
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
And we have the biggest proportion of women cycling. And this tells you a lot when you have that. I don't know the number currently, but it got to about 20 or 25% of women cycling, which is in Brazil, it's rare. And you see kids going to school, you see moms and dads taking kids to school on bicycles, and it's really, really nice.
So you've got the example right there in your country. Yeah. You've got the example, the blueprint that the rest of the country could follow.
Yeah, as I said, the pilot city that's going to do it, to make the action plan from UCB's strategy is Niterói, my hometown, because we are able to advocate for that, because this was built, like there was a politician that was very interested in having cycling as really a mode of transportation. It's focused on that. So he created a program that when he became mayor, he made this program become the department that it is today. And today, this department has a budget to plan for and to pay for the cycling infrastructure that we have. So I don't think it would have happened without us shouting on the streets that we needed more infrastructure. We used to have plenaries on the streets. Representatives from local representatives would participate in it. Members of the mayor's office would participate in it. And there's plenaries and the critical mass, and there was cycling events, and we organized a lot of stuff. So I think this has a lot to do with UCB. In 2014, we started to organize a campaign called The Bicycle in the Elections, where it would approach politicians during the political campaign and for them to include cycling in their programs. In 2016, it was again a bicycle on the campaign, and after that, it became active mobility. And then after that, sustainable mobility, which is the name that we currently use, and to include everybody, pedestrians, public transport users, and cyclists. So the mobility is really included in the politicians' programs during the campaign. So we can talk to them later and say, look, you said this here. Another important thing that UCB did was I helped with that, was to have a bill approved and it became law. It's called the Brazilian Bicycle Program. Since 2024, they started giving money for initiatives around Brazil. You have to apply for it. Last year and the year before, UCB has received the award for some of our but other initiatives as well, which is great. So it was a way, and it was a legislation that we were able to pass and to have been sanctioned by the president at the time in 2018. And this was the start of our cycling strategy.
We're coming to the end of our interview. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would like to share with our listeners?
Even though here in Brasilia it's really hard to cycle, I wouldn't choose anything else.
Wow.
That's, I think, the main thing. Cycling for me is second nature. It's something, it's natural. The first thing that when we came back from the UK to Brazil, the first thing that I wanted to buy was a bicycle, because the one I had when I was 13 was gone. I used this bicycle till I left Brazil many years later, but it was gone and I had no bicycle. I was like, I want a bicycle. I can't use the car in the city. I can't. Cycling is life.
Well, we might think we're dedicated, and other people listening to this in other countries might think they're dedicated, but I've got to take my hat off to you, Ana. Ana Carboni, thanks for squeaking.
Thank you.
Well, Sarah, that was a stunning and somewhat disturbing in some ways conversation. What were your impressions?
Yes, there were disturbing aspects to it particularly around the fatalities that we'll talk about in a moment. But I think also what really struck me is just how much is so familiar, and just some of the things she talked about, like when they have their World Bicycle Forum, the big emerging, the continuing theme is around road safety and the fact that they've discovered they really need to be working with other modes like the walking and people accessing public transport in order to even get a voice at the table. That is just so familiar with the situation we have in Australia and many other places around the world. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to be hearing the voices of people from outside the usual bubbles. The other one that I thought was, again, incredibly familiar was the lack of women riding bikes, the lack of political will to change, and the fact that where there was that successful city of Niterói, I've probably completely butchered the sound of that.
Oh, you couldn't make it worse than I would, Sarah, don't worry.
But what was really interesting was that successful because the mayor was in there championing. And so I guess with all of those things, I thought this is just, you could say this about any city in Australia or New Zealand or probably the US and Canada, that those things are just so frustratingly familiar. So I guess that part is where I really sort of latched in on that conversation.
Indeed, we're all humans with all our lumps and bumps and foibles. Actually, I'll start with Niterói, seeing you mentioned that first. Fortunately, we've had half a day since the interview, and I've done some research thanks to Gemini AI and Google and Wikipedia, so they are my sources. Niterói is a coastal city of about 500,000 residents, but it's actually part of the greater Rio de Janeiro metropolitan area. In fact, it's directly across the water from Rio, across the bay. And Niterói is actually the wealthiest city in Brazil. It looks beautiful looking at the photos. It's coastal, bays, beaches. And would you believe, as we heard from Anna, it had a champion mayor, but it's also an affluent city, which probably helps. And it has a citywide speed limit of 30 kilometres an hour, an extensive bike infrastructure, including 3 of the busiest, in fact, not just 3 of the busiest, but the 3 busiest bike lanes in Brazil, as Anna also referred to one that does indeed get 7,000 riders a day, according to my research. And would you believe, Sarah, have a guess between 2020 and 2024 in this city of 500,000 people, how many cyclist fatalities there were?
50.
0.
No.
They had 0 cyclist fatalities in this city of 500,000 people in that 4-year span. Now let's contrast that to the rest of Brazil. Between 2014 and 2024, Brazil recorded 14,834 cyclist deaths, maintaining the tragic and steady average of 4 per day, every day for a decade. And even worse, 15 years ago, cyclist fatalities made up less than 1% of the total traffic deaths, but now they're roughly 3.5% of all road fatalities. And most of the victims are male, working-class citizens who rely on bicycles for transport. Faced with bad choices, they've got a long commute to work. They can either walk for 2 hours, catch a bus that might take them 2 hours. They can't afford to drive there because Brazil's per capita GDP is about a quarter or a third that of most Western countries. They ride and they get hit by motor vehicles, which is by far the largest cause of death. And, that breadwinner has just been taken from that family. Shocking, isn't it, Sarah?
It is, and I think also, as with many countries, that is people's livelihoods, to be moving things around by bike or travelling by bike, doing deliveries and so on. So, yeah, that's really tragic.
Just some more statistics, seeing I was on a roll. If you think that's bad for cyclists, the pedestrian death toll generally ranges between 5,000 and 6,500 pedestrians. For example, 2023, which is the last complete numbers available, 5,340 pedestrians killed, which is comprising 15.6% of their entire road toll of 34,110 people in that year killed by traffic violence, which is a staggeringly high road toll. Brazil's death rate through traffic violence is actually 15.7 people per 100,000 inhabitants, or it was that number in 2021, which ranks at 118th in the world. And by comparison, best practice countries, would you like to hazard a guess what some of the best practice countries in the world might be or include?
Iceland?
Yes, the Scandinavians they're right up there. Good guess. And others include Japan and the UK, interestingly. But for these best practice countries, they range from 2 to 3 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants per year. Interestingly, the Netherlands is a bit higher, 4.1. Canada's 4.7. USA, 14.4. USA is way down the list. Funny, isn't it? So, well, it's not funny at all. It's actually tragic. But gives you an idea of how many people die, 7 times more than, if you like, need to. If Brazil took up best practice, they would, instead of having 34,000 people a year die, they'll have 5,000, which is still way too many, but in a country of 213 million people, I think, it's relatively low. Pretty stunning statistics.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. And I think, as we heard from Anna, it then means that people are very reluctant, particularly women, to get out on bikes. That's such a small proportion of bike riders are women. But it was also really interesting to hear her talk about personal safety, especially at night. And I think that that's a topic that is really only just beginning to be addressed in Australia. We've tended to think of women's safety or their perception of safety as not being particularly important, where now the research is showing, even in our context here, that something like 85% of women will either change their route or use a different mode of transport or avoid a location because of their perceptions of personal safety. So I thought that was really good to hear that perspective, and a very real story from her perspective as well.
But overall, what an unbelievable warrior. Fancy living in Brasilia completely car-free. My goodness, that woman's a lot braver than I am, Sarah.
And that she's committed her life to this, that she is just in there every day meeting with politicians and setting up this and running this World Bike Forum, etc., is just an amazing commitment to the cause.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we interviewed her, and thank you very much for the idea and suggestion. We'll move on to our final session of each episode, which is What's Up. We always finish with What's Up, a chance to say what we've been doing recently and what might be coming up in future. What's up, Sarah?
Well, while we're doing this recording, it is actually World Bicycle Day, which is a United Nations endorsed day committed to bicycles. And that is the 3rd of June every year. That's when we happen to be doing this particular podcast recording. And because I'm on the World Cycling Alliance, my WhatsApp group with the other board members around the world is about to be lighting up with all the events that they're running globally. So that's a pretty exciting day for us. The other big news is that the Australian government, in the most recent budget, announced $500 million for cycling and walking infrastructure, which is fantastic. It's spread over 10 years, so that effectively doubles the funding from what was 90 cents per person annually across the country to $1.80. It's a fantastic win for all those advocacy organisations, with huge input from We Ride Australia in partnership with all these other organisations, including Better Streets, Bicycle New South Wales, Bicycle Network, West Cycle, Bicycle Queensland, and many, many more. And we'll also be looking forward to later this month, the Australian local governments from around Australia will be meeting in Canberra, and they're going to be hopefully debating a bill that is going up that came through from Better Streets, and that bill is going to be for local governments to approach the federal government and say, it's great that you've got this funding, we need a lot more, because at the end of the day, it's only a really, really tiny, less than 1% of the transport budget. So that's what's up for us.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Sarah. But maybe you missed the second announcement that they've decided to front load that money. Even though it's 500 million over 10 years, I think year one from memory was 93 million and then 80 something million.
Correct.
And so on. And last year when they announced $100 million over 4 years, they ended up spending all of it in 1 year. So clearly the job for us advocates, if you like, is to front load that just as hard as we can, and hopefully more will follow. And I believe most of that money is also going to be requiring dollar for dollar matching from local governments as well. Maybe that 500 million can be turned into $1 billion. Like you say, it's still chicken feed compared to what goes on motorways and whatever, but it is good news, and it's good to share good news. So thank you very much, Sarah. For my What's Up, I'm going to talk about bicycle shows. I've been a bicycle show tragic for decades, and in fact, in a previous life ran the Australian bicycle show, which was called the Bicycling Australia Show, very imaginative name, when we had a company called Bicycling Australia, for about a decade. And over the years, I've been to shows in Milan, Shenzhen, Interbike, which was first in Los Angeles, Anaheim, and then in Las Vegas. What a lovely town Las Vegas is. And then China Cycle. I say that with a smile for the benefit of people because there's no video. Taipei Cycle Sea Otter, which is in a lovely place, Monterey, California, and Laguna Seca. and normally every year Eurobike since about 20 plus years ago. But this year I've decided no more Eurobike for me. I'm instead going to go to China Cycle, which is not on again till next year, but I haven't been to China Cycle for well over a decade, and I'm a bit in trepidation of going because as a member of the media, it's not the world's most media friendly country. So if I don't come back, Sarah, it's been nice knowing you and lovely working with you, but I really feel compelled to go because just like is happening in the car industry, China is just taking over global bicycle production at a rate of knots. And this year's China Cycle, to give you a few numbers, 13 halls, 160,000 square metres, 1,600 exhibitors, 156,000 visitors, including 17,000 international trade visitors from 144 different countries.
Phil, are they going to give you a bike so you can just get around the trade floor?
I have to walk. I read somebody's report that they did 20,000 steps a day. Trade shows are always exhausting. You've got to wear the most comfortable shoes and psych yourself up that you're going to be in pain by the end of the day, no matter what.
It sounds like they need to put it in a velodrome so
Absolutely.
everyone can just ride to all the different
Absolutely.
parts.
But I am, speaking of cycling, it's in Shanghai, and Shanghai is one of the leading cities, including Beijing, that is experiencing a resurgence, as we heard on a previous podcast, on the Squeaky Wheel podcast. I'm looking forward to riding around Shanghai a bit and seeing what's going on there as well, and just observing the rise of the Chinese brands and see what's going on. There's a lot of innovation happening. That's my What's Up, Sarah. Any final words from you?
No, we're heading into winter. It is about to be the shortest day of the year, being winter solstice. So I guess for everyone out there, keep warm and dry and keep the bike lights on.
And for you lucky listeners in the Northern Hemisphere, it's about to be your summer solstice, your longest day of the year. We are jealous. So that's all for the Squeaky Wheel podcast for this month. Until next month, keep squeaking.